A karate instructor laughs at a 90-year-old woman joining his class, mocking the elderly widow in front of 20 students as she struggles to prove she belongs. The arrogant bully forces the grandmother into an impossible challenge, setting her up to fail while his students film her humiliation. But the quiet janitor mopping floors in the corner isn't just another employee. This is Donnie Yen himself. The instructor has no idea he just humiliated a war hero in front of a martial arts legend who spent decades destroying bullies on screen and off. While the cocky teacher demands the old woman leave his dojo forever, the movie star approaches with deadly calm, recognizing something in her movements that makes his blood run cold. The grandmother isn't just any elderly student. She's the legendary Phoenix of Seoul, a master warrior who trained soldiers during the Korean War. The bully's smug students keep recording, thinking they're capturing another embarrassment, but they're actually filming their teacher's last moments of arrogance. What happens when you mock the wrong grandmother in front of the wrong janitor? Will the instructor survive learning why some legends never retire? What happened next would terrorize the bully for the rest of his pathetic existence. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Evelyn Murphy sat at her kitchen table, staring at the glossy brochure her granddaughter had left behind. The morning light streamed through faded curtains, illuminating the dust motes that danced above the pamphlet's bold letters. Kellerman Elite Martial Arts Academy. Her weathered fingers traced the edges of the paper as she glanced at the photographs lining her mantelpiece. Walter in his army uniform. Their wedding day in 1953, decades of Christmas mornings with children and grandchildren. 6 months. 6 months since Walter's funeral, since the house had fallen silent except for the ticking of his old military clock. The walls seemed to press closer each day, filled with memories that both comforted and suffocated her. "You used to be so strong, Grandma," Lucy had said yesterday, her voice gentle but concerned. "I remember the stories Grandpa told about meeting you during the war. Maybe it's time to try something new." Evelyn had deflected, as always. "Those were just Walter's war stories, dear. You know how soldiers like to embellish." But Lucy's words lingered, stirring something deep within her chest, a restlessness that had been growing stronger each day. The brochure promised fitness for all ages, balance improvement, and social interaction. Simple enough goals for a 90-year-old widow trying to fill empty hours. She picked up the phone twice before setting it down, her heart racing at the thought of walking into a room full of strangers. On the third attempt, she dialed quickly before courage could abandon her. "Kellerman Elite Martial Arts Academy." A young voice answered cheerfully. "Hello, I'd like to ask about classes for someone my age." Evelyn's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Of course. We have a wonderful beginner's program." "How old might that someone be?" 90. A pause. 90? Oh my. "Well, we do encourage fitness at every age. Would you like to schedule a trial class?" 20 minutes later, Evelyn hung up with an appointment for the following afternoon. She walked to Walter's photograph, touching the glass gently. "I hope I remember how to be brave," she whispered to his smiling face. Somewhere deep inside, beneath decades of careful restraint, something stirred, like embers waiting for the right wind to spark them back to life. The afternoon sun blazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Kellerman Elite Martial Arts Academy as Evelyn approached the modern glass entrance. Her small gym bag, purchased that morning along with simple black workout clothes at Lucy's insistence, felt heavier with each step toward the door. Through the transparent walls, she watched young athletes moving with fluid precision across pristine training mats. Their ages ranged from teenagers to young adults, all possessing the confident grace of people comfortable in their bodies. Evelyn's reflection in the glass revealed everything she was not: elderly, uncertain, clearly out of place in this temple of youth and vigor. The automatic doors whooshed open, releasing a wave of air conditioning and the sharp scent of floor cleaner. A petite blonde girl behind a sleek reception desk looked up with practiced enthusiasm. "You must be Mrs. Murphy. I'm Jenny. Welcome to Kellerman Elite." Her smile was genuine, though Evelyn caught the flicker of surprise in her blue eyes. "Thank you, dear. I'm a bit nervous, I'll admit." "Oh, don't be. Everyone starts somewhere. Let me just get your paperwork." As Jenny rustled through files, Evelyn observed the dojo's interior. Motivational posters featuring muscular athletes lined the walls between gleaming trophies and certificates. A large banner proclaimed, "Champions train here," above photographs of tournament winners, all young and fierce-looking. In the corner, she noticed a quiet Asian man in maintenance coveralls methodically mopping the floors, his movements surprisingly graceful for someone performing such mundane work. Students began filtering in for the 4 p.m. class, their conversations punctuated by the thud of equipment bags hitting benches. They moved with the easy confidence of people who belonged, barely glancing at the elderly woman completing her registration forms. "Mrs. Murphy." Jenny's voice carried a note of concern. "Our head instructor, Mr. Kellerman, will want to meet you before class begins. He likes to assess all new students personally." Before Evelyn could respond, a door marked "Private" swung open, revealing a tall, imposing man with perfectly styled blonde hair and the overdeveloped physique of someone who spent more time looking in mirrors than teaching students. His expensive, athletic wear bore the academy's logo, and his smile had the practiced warmth of a used car salesman. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying across the lobby, "I think you might be looking for the community center down the street." Brad Kellerman approached with the exaggerated concern of someone addressing a lost child. He spoke slowly and distinctly, as if Evelyn might be hard of hearing. "Sweetheart, this isn't bingo night. We do real martial arts here." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the gathering students. 20 young faces turned toward the unfolding scene, some clearly uncomfortable but none willing to speak up. Kellerman basked in their attention like a performer feeding off an audience. "Mr. Kellerman," Jenny interjected softly. "Mrs. Murphy completed all her paperwork and paid for a clerical error, obviously." He waved dismissively. "I'm sure you understand, ma'am. Insurance liability, safety concerns. We can't have someone getting hurt because they bit off more than they can chew." Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks, the familiar sting of condescension she'd endured countless times since Walter's death. Doctors speaking to Lucy instead of her, store clerks treating her like a doddering fool, the slow erosion of dignity that seemed to accompany old age. "What's next, Walker Fu?" "Denture defense," Kellerman continued, playing to his audience of impressionable students. "Maybe we should offer gentle yoga for seniors instead. There's a nice community center, just, young man." Evelyn's voice cut through his mockery with unexpected steel. "I've faced worse than your rudeness. I'm staying." In the corner, the maintenance worker paused his cleaning. His grip tightened on the mop handle until his knuckles showed white, but his face remained carefully neutral. The name tag on his coveralls read Danny, and his dark eyes missed nothing as Kellerman's cruelty escalated. "Look, Grandma." Kellerman's tone shifted from condescending to coldly dismissive. "This is an elite training facility. We prepare champions, not provide entertainment for the Medicare crowd. You'll only embarrass yourself and waste everyone's time." Several students exchanged uncomfortable glances. A 17-year-old boy named Tommy shifted his weight nervously, while a young woman named Maria frowned openly at their instructor's behavior. But none found the courage to challenge someone who controlled their training and advancement. The maintenance worker, Danny, repositioned himself to maintain a clear view of the confrontation. His movements were fluid, purposeful, like a predator choosing the perfect angle of observation. Students barely registered his presence, but his attention was completely focused on Evelyn's humiliation. Kellerman crossed his arms, muscles bulging theatrically. "So what's it going to be, sweetheart? The easy way or the embarrassing way?" Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I paid my registration fee, just like everyone else. I'm not leaving because you find my age inconvenient." Kellerman's jaw tightened. He'd expected the old woman to shuffle away in tears, not stand her ground with such quiet determination. His students watched with growing fascination as their usually dominant instructor faced unexpected resistance from the most unlikely opponent. "Fine." His smile turned predatory. "You want to play with the big kids? Let's see what you've got." He gestured toward the changing rooms with mock gallantry. "Go get dressed, and we'll give everyone here a lesson about knowing your limitations." Several students looked genuinely distressed now. Jenny half rose from her desk, mouth opening to protest, but Kellerman silenced her with a sharp glare. "The Maintenance worker in the corner had stopped all pretense of cleaning, his full attention locked on the unfolding drama. "Tommy, Maria, set up the mirrors," Kellerman commanded. "I want everyone to have a perfect view of what happens when people don't listen to good advice." His voice carried the cruel excitement of a playground bully who'd found a perfect victim. Evelyn walked toward the changing area with measured steps, her back straight despite the weight of 20 pairs of eyes following her progress. Behind her, she heard Kellerman addressing his students with theatrical authority. "Today you learn an important lesson about respect. Respect for your instructor, respect for your own safety, and respect for reality. Some people need to learn the hard way." In the women's changing room, Evelyn stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The simple black workout clothes Lucy had purchased looked foreign on her small frame. When had she become this fragile-looking creature? When had the strong woman Walter had fallen in love with disappeared behind arthritis and age spots? She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, searching for something she hadn't felt in decades. The calm center that had once carried her through impossible situations. Her fingers found the small silver locket at her throat, containing Walter's picture from their wedding day. "Help me be brave," she whispered to his memory. When she emerged from the changing room, Kellerman was waiting with his arms crossed and a satisfied smirk. The training mats had been arranged in a perfect rectangle, surrounded by mirrors that would multiply her expected failure from every angle. "Well, don't you look ready for action, Grandma?" he announced, his voice dripping with false encouragement. "Let's see what 9 decades of experience can teach us all." Kellerman positioned himself at the center of the training area like a ringmaster preparing for his favorite act. The 20 students formed a loose semicircle around the mirrors, some eager for entertainment, others visibly uncomfortable with their instructor's cruelty. "Here's the deal, sweetheart," Kellerman announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm a fair man, so I'll give you one chance to prove you belong here." He gestured dramatically toward the empty mat. "Perform one basic kata, just one simple form, without falling or giving up, and I'll personally train you for free. 1 whole month of private lessons." Several students murmured at the unexpected generosity, not recognizing the trap being set. Jenny clutched her pen nervously, sensing the challenge was designed to humiliate rather than encourage. "But if you fail," Kellerman continued, his voice dropping to emphasize the stakes, "you leave immediately and never come back. No refunds, no second chances, no lawyers calling about discrimination. You tried, you failed, end of story." The maintenance worker had abandoned his mop entirely now, standing perfectly still in the corner. His nameplate caught the fluorescent light. "Danny." His dark eyes moved between Kellerman and Evelyn with the intensity of someone calculating odds and angles. "That seems hardly fair," Maria whispered to Tommy, who nodded grimly but remained silent. "Life isn't fair, Miss Gonzalez," Kellerman snapped, having overheard. "The sooner you learn that, the better prepared you'll be for real competition." Evelyn stepped onto the mat, her movements careful but determined. The mirrors reflected her image from every angle. A small, elderly woman in oversized black clothing, facing an opponent who wasn't even planning to fight her. The real enemy was time, gravity, and the accumulated weight of 9 decades. "Any basic kata will do," Kellerman added with false generosity. "Start whenever you're ready, Grandma." The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant traffic outside. Even Danny had stopped moving, his attention completely focused on the drama about to unfold. Evelyn closed her eyes, centering herself in the middle of the mat. When she opened them again, something had changed, a subtle shift in posture, a steadying of breath that suggested hidden depths. She bowed formally and assumed the opening stance. Evelyn's feet found their position with surprising certainty, her body remembering distances and angles buried beneath decades of careful restraint. The fluorescent lights seemed to dim as she focused inward, shutting out the watching eyes and mocking expectations. She began the kata. The first movements came slowly, her aged joints protesting the unfamiliar demands. Students leaned forward, expecting the inevitable stumble, the embarrassing collapse that would justify Kellerman's cruelty. But as Evelyn progressed through the sequence, something remarkable began to emerge. Her blocks flowed into strikes with increasing fluidity. Her stances, while not perfect, showed an underlying understanding of balance and leverage that couldn't be faked. Each transition revealed glimpses of muscle memory from a time when these forms had been as natural as breathing. That Tommy's mouth opened in amazement as he watched the elderly woman's transformation. The awkward uncertainty of moments before was melting away, replaced by movements that spoke of years, decades, of serious training. "Holy shit," someone whispered, immediately reddening when Kellerman's glare found them. Maria noticed it first, the way Evelyn's breathing had synchronized with her movements, the slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth as forgotten. Rhythms reasserted themselves. This wasn't a beginner stumbling through unfamiliar motions. This was someone coming home. In the corner, Danny had gone completely still. His eyes tracked every technique, every subtle shift in Evelyn's posture, with the intensity of a master recognizing another master's work. His hands slowly curled into fists at his sides. Kellerman's confident smirk began to waver as Evelyn moved through increasingly complex sequences without faltering. The kata she'd chosen wasn't the simple beginner's form he'd expected. It was traditional Korean martial arts, executed with precision that spoke of serious training. The room held its collective breath as Evelyn approached the kata's conclusion. Her final combination, a defensive block flowing into a devastating counterstrike, was performed with such grace that several students involuntarily stepped backward. She finished with a formal bow, her chest rising and falling steadily, eyes bright, with an inner fire that hadn't been there minutes before. The silence stretched unbearably until Jenny began to clap, her applause echoing loudly in the stunned quiet. Several students joined her, their respect genuine and growing. Kellerman's face had gone pale, his carefully constructed humiliation backfiring spectacularly. Kellerman's mind raced as he watched his students' respectful applause for the woman he'd intended to humiliate. This wasn't part of the plan. The old lady should have collapsed in embarrassment by now, not performed kata with the precision of someone who'd trained seriously for years. "Well," he forced out, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration, "that was adequate for a beginner. But let's see how you handle something actually challenging." His words died as Danny walked deliberately across the training floor, each step measured and purposeful. The maintenance worker's humble demeanor had vanished completely, replaced by the bearing of someone accustomed to command and respect. Students turned to watch, confused by this unprecedented interruption from the quiet janitor they barely noticed. Danny stopped directly in front of Evelyn, removed his baseball cap with slow ceremony, and performed a deep, formal bow, the kind reserved for masters in traditional martial arts. The gesture was so unexpected, so clearly reverential, that several students gasped audibly. "My name is Donnie Yen," he said quietly, his voice carrying natural authority that filled every corner of the silent dojo. "And I believe we haven't been properly introduced." Maria's hand flew to her mouth. Tommy's eyes went wide with recognition. Even Jenny dropped her pen as the implications hit home. Their quiet janitor was one of the most famous martial artists in the world. Kellerman's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and growing panic as he realized his carefully maintained authority was crumbling before his eyes. "Your stance in the third sequence," Donnie continued, speaking directly to Evelyn with deep respect. "That's traditional Korean style, isn't it? Modified Tang Soo Do with elements I haven't seen since the war years." Evelyn's composure finally cracked. Tears began streaming down her weathered cheeks as she nodded slowly. Decades of hidden identity surfacing under the recognition of someone who truly understood. "You learned during the Korean conflict," Donnie stated with gentle certainty. "When American forces were stationed in Seoul, training with the resistance fighters who kept the old ways alive." "Yes," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "They called me the Phoenix of Seoul." The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Students stared in amazement at the transformation of their elderly classmate into a figure of legend. Kellerman stood frozen, watching his world shift on its axis as two masters faced each other with mutual recognition and respect. The name hung in the air like a challenge. Phoenix of Seoul. Students exchanged confused glances while Jenny frantically typed into her phone, searching for information about a legend none of them had ever heard of. "Master Eve Chin Murphy," Donnie said with profound respect, using her full name like a prayer. I've heard the stories. The resistance fighter who trained American soldiers in close combat. The woman who could disable 3 men before they knew she'd moved. Kellerman found his voice, though it came out strangled and desperate. Look, I don't care who you think you are, or who she claims to be. This is my dojo, and I set the rules. Here, your dojo? Donnie's attention shifted to Kellerman with the focused intensity of a predator evaluating prey. The same dojo that's been flagged by the Athletic Commission for financial irregularities? The one where tournament prize money has been mysteriously disappearing. The color drained completely from Kellerman's face. Several students leaned forward, suddenly understanding that something much larger was unfolding before them. You're not just a janitor, Kellerman stammered. No, Donnie replied calmly. I'm an investigator for the Athletic Commission, and you've been very helpful in demonstrating exactly the kind of behavior we've been looking into. Evelyn wiped her tears, her posture straightening as decades of carefully maintained disguise fell away. The frightened elderly woman who'd entered the dojo an hour ago had been replaced by someone with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. The Phoenix of Seoul, Tommy whispered to Maria, showing her his phone screen. Holy shit, she's real. Look at this. Korean War records, commendations from the U.S. Army, photographs from the 1950s. Maria stared at the images of a young Asian woman in military gear, then at Evelyn, seeing the same determined eyes separated by 70 years. Mr. Kellerman, Jenny called out from her desk, her voice shaking. There are 3 police cars pulling into the parking lot. Kellerman spun toward the windows, panic flooding his features as uniformed officers emerged from patrol vehicles and began walking toward the academy's entrance. Donnie smiled with grim satisfaction. I believe they're here about those missing youth program funds you've been so creative with. The doors burst open as Kellerman's carefully constructed world collapsed around him. 2 masters standing united against the corruption he represented. The police officers entered with measured authority, led by Detective Sarah Martinez, a stern woman in her 40s who'd been building the case against Kellerman for months. Students pressed against the walls as badges and handcuffs became visible. The training session transformed into a crime scene. Mr. Kellerman, Detective Martinez announced, we have a warrant to search these premises for financial records related to youth athletic programs. Kellerman's face cycled through desperation and calculation. This is harassment. I run a legitimate business here, a business that's been systematically defrauding families and stealing tournament funds. Donnie interrupted, producing a small recording device from his coverall pocket. Everything you've said and done here has been documented as part of our investigation. Several students gasped as they realized their janitor had been gathering evidence for weeks. Tommy looked at Maria with growing understanding. All those times they'd complained about excessive fees and missing scholarship money, someone had actually been listening. The Athletic Commission has been tracking unusual financial patterns in youth martial arts programs, Donnie explained to the stunned students. Missing prize money, inflated registration fees, scholarship funds that never reached deserving families. Detective Martinez nodded grimly. We estimate over $40,000 has been diverted from programs meant to help underprivileged kids afford training. Evelyn stepped forward, her transformation from frightened elderly woman to determined advocate complete. He's also been blackmailing families, she said clearly, threatening to expose personal information unless they pay inflated fees without complaint. That's a serious accusation, Detective Martinez replied. Do you have evidence? My granddaughter received threats this morning, Evelyn continued. Fabricated scandals designed to force compliance and silence. Tommy found his voice suddenly. My family too. We got photos and documents threatening to ruin my dad's job unless we paid the premium training fees without questioning them. Maria nodded vigorously. Same here. My mother was terrified about some made-up controversy regarding our immigration status. As more students began sharing similar experiences, Kellerman's face grew ashen. His empire of intimidation and theft was unraveling thread by thread, exposed by the very people he'd been exploiting. Detective Martinez smiled grimly as she surveyed the gathering testimony. Mr. Kellerman, I think we need to have a longer conversation. Downtown. 9 o'clock that evening found the dojo dark and empty, its fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the training mats. Evelyn used the key card Donnie had provided, slipping through the rear entrance like a woman decades younger. The familiar ache in her joints seemed less pronounced now, as if admitting her true identity had lifted a physical burden she'd carried. For years, Donnie waited in the center of the training area, having traded his janitor's coveralls for traditional black training clothes that emphasized his legendary status. He bowed respectfully as she approached, the gesture carrying none of the mockery Kellerman had displayed hours earlier. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he admitted. "After everything that happened today, Walter always taught me that when good people find each other, they should stand together," Evelyn replied, settling into a warm-up stance with surprising fluidity. "Besides, we have work to finish." They began slowly, each testing the other's capabilities and approach. Donnie's Wing Chun techniques were precise and economical, perfected through decades of film work and real combat training. Evelyn's Korean martial arts foundation ran deeper. Reflexes honed during wartime when mistakes meant death, not just lost tournaments. "Your defensive positioning is remarkable," Donnie observed as they moved through controlled sparring sequences. "I can see why the resistance fighters valued your training. You adapt your style beautifully to each opponent," Evelyn replied, appreciating his ability to modify his attacks to challenge without overwhelming her. "Cinema taught you to make everything look effortless." As they trained, they shared information about Kellerman's operation. Donnie had documented weeks of suspicious behavior, altered financial records, threatening phone calls to parents, meetings with unsavory characters who clearly weren't legitimate martial arts instructors. "The corruption runs deeper than stolen prize money," he explained between forms. "He's been running what amounts to a protection racket, targeting families who can't afford legal challenges." Evelyn's movements sharpened as anger fueled her techniques. "Bullies never change, they just find new victims. In Seoul, we dealt with men like him permanently." "This isn't wartime," Donnie cautioned gently. "We need evidence, not vengeance." "Evidence can be gathered many ways," Evelyn replied with a smile that would have terrified Kellerman. "Some methods are more traditional than others." Their training session was interrupted by car headlights sweeping across the windows. They froze, melting into shadows as a security patrol passed slowly, clearly unaware of the legends preparing for war inside. Kellerman arrived at the academy before dawn, his usual confidence replaced by barely controlled paranoia. The police search had been thorough, but ultimately limited by warrant restrictions. They'd found irregularities, but not the hidden files containing his most damaging secrets. He moved through the dojo systematically, checking for signs of intrusion. Training mats had been repositioned slightly. Equipment showed evidence of recent use. Most telling were the security camera angles. Someone had adjusted them to create blind spots that hadn't existed the day before. "God damn it," he muttered, pulling up the overnight footage on his laptop. The recorded images revealed everything. Donnie and the old woman training together like master and student, sharing techniques, and clearly planning something that threatened his entire operation. His phone buzzed with increasingly desperate messages from parents he'd been blackmailing. Word of his arrest had spread through the community overnight, emboldening families who'd been living in fear of his manufactured scandals. Kellerman made a series of rapid phone calls, his voice tight with controlled desperation. "Marcus, it's Brad. I need that favor we discussed." "Yes, immediately. Bring Chun Wei and the big Russian. This is worth double our usual arrangement." The men he contacted weren't legitimate martial artists. They were professional intimidators who specialized in making problems disappear. Marcus Rodriguez had done time for assault before discovering that violence could be profitable in the right circumstances. Chun Wei's background included underground fighting circuits where rules were suggestions and medical attention was scarce. His second call went to Lucy's mother. "Mrs. Patterson? Brad Kellerman. I think there's been a misunderstanding about yesterday's events. No, your family is still very much at risk if certain information becomes public. The photographs I mentioned? They're just the beginning unless we can reach an accommodation." By noon, Kellerman had contacted 12 families, escalating his threats while positioning himself as their only protection against exposure. Fear was his greatest weapon, and he wielded it with practiced cruelty. His final call was to a contact at a local storage facility where his most sensitive documents were hidden. "Yeah, it's me. I need access to Unit 47 tonight." Clean out everything and transport it to the backup location. Pay the extra fee for immediate service. Monies. No object right now. As he ended the call, Kellerman stared at the security footage again, watching the old woman move with impossible grace for someone her age. Something about her technique looked familiar, triggering memories he couldn't quite place. He opened his laptop's browser and typed, "Phoenix of Seoul Korean War Martial Arts." The results made his blood run cold. Lucy sat in her mother's kitchen, both women staring at the manila envelope that had arrived with the morning mail. Inside were photographs that made Lucy's stomach turn, images of her husband during his worst PTSD episodes, medical records that were supposed to be confidential, and documents suggesting financial improprieties that could destroy his career. How did he get these? Lucy whispered, her hands shaking as she examined forged bank statements and edited photographs designed to make her family look corrupt and unstable. Men like Kellerman have resources, her mother replied grimly. Your grandfather warned me about bullies with power. They collect secrets like weapons, waiting for the right moment to use them. The attached letter was professionally typed, but personally vicious. Your family's cooperation in resolving certain misunderstandings would be greatly appreciated. Continued enrollment in our premium programs would demonstrate your commitment to discretion regarding recent unfortunate events. Alternative arrangements might prove uncomfortable for everyone involved. Lucy's phone rang, displaying Kellerman's number. She hesitated before answering, knowing that engaging with him would only provide more ammunition for his campaign of intimidation. Miss Patterson, I hope you received my package. I'm calling to express my concern for your family's well-being during these challenging times. What do you want? Lucy's voice barely contained her rage. Simply continued enrollment in our program. Your grandmother's performance yesterday was quite remarkable. I'd hate to see her reputation tarnished by association with family difficulties. The threat was clear. Pay his inflated fees and stay silent, or watch her family destroyed by carefully crafted lies and selectively edited evidence. You're a monster, Lucy said quietly. I'm a businessman protecting his interests. Your husband's military records make fascinating reading. Did you know that certain episodes weren't properly reported to his current employer? Lucy ended the call, her whole body shaking with fury and fear. Similar scenes were playing out across the community as Kellerman's victims realized the scope of his information-gathering operation at Maria's house. Her mother wept over documents suggesting immigration violations that could result in deportation. Tommy's family faced evidence of tax issues that could bankrupt his father's small business. Each family received the same message: continued silence and compliance, or public destruction through carefully manufactured scandals. By afternoon, Evelyn's phone was ringing constantly as desperate parents reached out to the woman who'd stood up to their tormentor. Her small apartment became an impromptu war room as families gathered to share their terror and seek guidance from someone who'd faced worse enemies in darker times. He has to be stopped, Maria's mother said through her tears. Our children deserve better than living in fear. Evelyn looked around at the frightened faces and felt something ignite in her chest. The same protective fury that had once driven her to fight impossible odds to defend the innocent. Evelyn and Donnie walked through the academy's front entrance during evening hours, moving with the deliberate purpose of people who'd made an irreversible decision. Kellerman waited in his office, flanked by two intimidating men in expensive suits who radiated the kind of casual violence that money could buy. Marcus the Hammer Rodriguez stood 6'4", with scarred knuckles and dead eyes. Chenwei was smaller but more dangerous, his movements suggesting years of underground fighting where rules were luxuries. Both men studied the approaching pair with professional interest, seeing easy targets in an elderly woman and a supposed janitor. You should have taken my advice and left town, Kellerman said, his confidence restored by hired muscle. But since you're here, let's discuss terms. We have a better idea, Evelyn replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. A public solution that serves everyone's interests. She outlined her proposal with military precision. A formal challenge match at the upcoming regional tournament, promoted as a charity exhibition featuring martial arts legends. If she and Donnie won, Kellerman would return all stolen funds, cease his blackmail operations, and submit to a complete athletic commission audit. If they lost, they would disappear forever and never interfere with his business again. "You're insane," Kellerman laughed, but his eyes showed calculation. 2. Old-timers against professional fighters. "The publicity alone would be worth millions," Donnie added. "Local media, veteran organizations, martial arts community. You'd look like a hero hosting an exhibition for charity while proving your academy produces champions." Marcus stepped forward menacingly. "Boss, why waste time with games? Let me handle this now." Kellerman raised a hand, his ego unable to resist the temptation. The chance to publicly humiliate famous opponents while appearing magnanimous was too perfect to refuse. He could already see the headlines. "Local instructor defeats aging legends in charity match." "1 week," he said finally. "The Phoenix Sports Complex holds 800 people. Winner takes all. Money, reputation, everything." "Agreed," Evelyn replied without hesitation. "You realize you're signing your own death warrant?" Kellerman added with cruel satisfaction. "My associates don't believe in pulling punches, even against senior citizens." "Then I hope you've made peace with your own God," Evelyn responded quietly. "Because some legends never fade. They just wait for the right moment to rise again." Dawn painted the city park in soft pastels as Evelyn and Donnie began their intensive preparation. The morning air carried autumn's bite, and Evelyn's movements showed the stiffness that came with 9 decades of accumulated wear on joints and muscles. "Your left shoulder's compensating for old damage," Donnie observed as they moved through warm-up exercises. "Korean War injury? Shrapnel from a mortar shell in 1952, Evelyn admitted, rotating her arm carefully. "Some wounds never fully heal. They just learn to work around themselves." Each day of training revealed the harsh reality of challenging men 30 years younger and infinitely more ruthless. Evelyn's reflexes, while still impressive, had slowed noticeably since her wartime peak. Her endurance flagged after extended sessions, forcing frequent breaks that would be impossible during actual combat. Meanwhile, word spread through the martial arts community about the upcoming exhibition. Veteran organizations began planning group attendance, drawn by stories of the legendary Phoenix of Seoul. Local media picked up the human interest angle, elderly masters facing modern challengers in a charity event that promised to be either inspiring or tragic. Donnie's research into their opponents painted a grim picture. Marcus Rodriguez had hospitalized 3 men in unsanctioned fights, using his size and complete lack of mercy to intimidate opponents into submission. Chun Wei's background included underground circuits where permanent injury was commonplace, and medical attention was an afterthought. "They're not martial artists," Donnie explained during a break between training sessions. "They're professional thugs who happen to know how to fight. No honor, no restraint, no concern for opponent welfare." "I've faced worse," Evelyn replied, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Have you? These men will try to hurt you permanently, not just defeat you. They're being paid to end careers and break spirits." That afternoon, Evelyn collapsed during a particularly intense sparring session, her legs giving out from exhaustion rather than technique failure. Donnie caught her as she fell, helping her to a park bench where she sat with shaking hands and labored breathing. "What if I'm just a foolish old woman after all?" she whispered, staring at her trembling fingers. "What if the Phoenix of Seoul died decades ago and I've been living on borrowed memories?" Around them, other park visitors went about their daily routines, oblivious to the legend, questioning everything she'd once believed about herself. Donnie sat beside her in supportive silence, knowing that some battles had to be fought alone, even by heroes. The Phoenix Sports Complex buzzed with unprecedented energy as over 800 spectators filled the arena for what local media had dubbed the Legend Returns exhibition match. Television crews positioned cameras while vendors sold commemorative programs featuring archival photographs of the young Phoenix of Seoul alongside current pictures of Donnie Yen. In the dressing room, Evelyn sat motionless before a full-length mirror, studying her reflection in traditional Korean martial arts attire. The black fabric with silver trim had been custom-tailored to accommodate her aged frame while honoring the ceremonial significance of the moment. "Second thoughts?" Donnie asked gently, adjusting his own traditional outfit. "Walter always said that courage isn't the absence of fear, It's doing what's right despite being terrified. She touched the silver locket at her throat. I'm more frightened than I've been since Seoul fell to enemy forces. The crowd outside grew louder as preliminary matches concluded. Many elderly veterans had made the journey, some in wheelchairs, others using walkers, all drawn by stories of a legend from their war. Their presence transformed the event from mere entertainment into something approaching a sacred ceremony. Kellerman played his role perfectly, introducing himself as the generous benefactor hosting a charity event for veteran organizations. His hired professionals were presented as demonstration team members who would provide appropriate challenge for our honored guests. The first match began with controlled formality. Evelyn and Donnie faced Marcus Rodriguez and a second fighter named Victor Kozlov, a mountain of a man whose reputation included underground bare-knuckle championships across Eastern Europe. What happened next surprised everyone, including the participants themselves. That Evelyn's traditional Korean forms provided a defensive foundation that frustrated the larger men's attempts to overwhelm through sheer force. Her blocks redirected rather than absorbed impact, using attackers' momentum against them. Meanwhile, Donnie's Wing Chun techniques created precise offensive opportunities that exploited the micro-openings her defensive work revealed. Their partnership was poetry in motion, decades of individual mastery combining into something neither could have achieved alone. The crowd erupted as Marcus Rodriguez hit the mat hard. Victor Kozlov stumbled backward, clutching his ribs, and two legends stood victorious against impossible odds. They bowed to acknowledge the thunderous applause. Victory seemed within reach. The Phoenix of Seoul had returned in spectacular fashion, proving that some fires never truly die. Then Evelyn's vision blurred, her coordination faltered, and unnatural weakness spread through her body like ice water in her veins. Evelyn staggered, her legs betraying her at the moment of triumph. The crowd's cheers turned to gasps of horror as she dropped to one knee on the tournament mat, Donnie catching her before she could collapse completely. "What's wrong?" he asked urgently, supporting her weight as she fought to remain conscious. "Can't. Something's wrong." Her words slurred slightly, pupils dilated beyond what adrenaline or exertion could explain. Medical personnel rushed onto the mat, while Kellerman provided concerned commentary to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly why we must be careful about pushing our elderly participants beyond safe limits. Let's give our medical team space to ensure Mrs. Murphy receives proper care." His voice carried practiced sympathy, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction as Evelyn was helped to a stretcher in the medical area. The tournament officials huddled in urgent conference, while spectators murmured with growing concern. "I'm afraid we'll need to postpone the remainder of the exhibition," Kellerman announced with false regret. "The safety of our participants must always come first." "No," Evelyn whispered from the medical area, trying to sit up despite the paramedics' restraining hand. "Something in the water." Donnie's expression hardened as understanding dawned. During the break between matches, Kellerman had personally handed Evelyn a bottle of water, expressing concern for her hydration. The gesture had seemed considerate. At the time, "You drugged her," Donnie said quietly, his voice carrying to the front rows. "That's a serious accusation with no basis in fact," Kellerman replied smoothly. "Perhaps the stress of competition has affected your judgment as well." With Evelyn incapacitated, the odds shifted dramatically. 3 professional fighters remained: Marcus Rodriguez, Chen Wei, and Victor Kozlov, all fresh and eager to demonstrate why age inevitably surrenders to youth and brutality. "The show must go on," Kellerman declared to the crowd. "Mr. Yen, you're welcome to forfeit with dignity, or we can proceed with the demonstration as planned." The arena fell silent as Donnie stood alone on the mat, facing overwhelming odds while his partner fought sedatives and despair in equal measure. 800 people held their breath, witnessing what appeared to be the inevitable end of legends who dared to challenge time itself. Marcus cracked his knuckles loudly, Chen Wei assumed a predatory stance, and Victor Kozlov smiled with the anticipation of violence. The trap had been sprung perfectly. Kellerman's voice carried across the arena. "Sometimes the old ways must give way to progress, no matter how painful the lesson." 3 professional fighters closed in on Donnie like wolves surrounding wounded prey. The arena's silence was broken only by the shuffle of feet on mats and the distant sound of medical personnel attending to Evelyn in the treatment area. Marcus Rodriguez struck first, his massive fist cutting through air where Donnie's head had been a split second earlier. The legendary martial artist moved with fluid precision, but fighting three opponents simultaneously pushed even his extraordinary skills to their breaking point. Viktor Kozlov's crushing bear hug attempt was deflected by lightning-fast Wing Chun techniques, but Chun Wei exploited the opening to land a vicious kick to Donnie's ribs. The impact echoed through the arena's sound system as spectators winced in sympathetic pain. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kellerman's voice boomed through the microphone. "This demonstration illustrates the harsh realities of combat. Experience and reputation can only carry you so far against superior numbers and youthful vigor." The crowd watched in tense silence as their hero absorbed punishment that would have felled lesser men. Blood trickled from a cut above Donnie's left eye, courtesy of Marcus's elbow strike. His breathing grew labored as the three fighters coordinated their attacks with professional efficiency. "Perhaps our guests would like to concede defeat gracefully," Kellerman continued, playing to the audience while his hired thugs systematically dismantle the legend. "There's no shame in acknowledging physical limitations." In the medical area, Evelyn drifted in and out of consciousness, the sedative battling her iron will for control of her faculties. Paramedics monitored her vital signs while debating whether to transport her to the hospital, unaware that their patient was fighting a war between pharmaceutical chemistry and 5 decades of suppressed warrior instincts. Donnie hit the mat hard, as Victor's massive fist connected with his solar plexus. He rolled desperately to avoid Chun Wei's follow-up stomp, but the coordinated assault was taking its toll. His legendary speed was still evident, but endurance had limits even for masters. The second knockdown came courtesy of Marcus's calculated knee strike. Donnie struggled to regain his footing as the three fighters prepared their final assault, confident that victory was inevitable against a single opponent. However skilled, 800 spectators held their breath, witnessing what appeared to be the tragic end of legend meeting brutal reality. In the medical area, Evelyn's unconscious mind wandered through memories that felt more real than the present moment. The antiseptic smell of the treatment room faded, replaced by the acrid smoke and distant artillery of Seoul in winter 1951. She was 26 again, leading a desperate retreat through enemy-controlled territory. American soldiers, boys, really, barely older than Tommy and Maria, depended on her knowledge of the terrain and her ability to fight when cornered. Walter was among them, a young sergeant with kind eyes who'd never questioned her authority despite cultural prejudices that should have made him dismiss an Asian woman giving orders. "Remember why they called you the Phoenix, Eve?" Walter's voice whispered through the pharmaceutical haze. Whether memory or hallucination, his words carried the same steady strength that had sustained her through impossible odds decades ago. The memory shifted to their darkest hour, surrounded by enemy forces, ammunition running low, wounded soldiers depending on her to find a miracle. She'd stood in a bombed-out building, facing 12 armed men with nothing but skill, determination, and the absolute refusal to let good people die while she still drew breath. "The Phoenix never dies," Walter's voice continued, as real as if he stood beside her stretcher. "It only waits for the right wind to rise from the ashes." Her vital signs strengthened as the memory played out in vivid detail. The impossible fight, the odds that should have been insurmountable, the moment when training and will combine to overcome force and numbers. She'd saved 17 American soldiers that night, including the man who would become her husband. The crowd's reaction to Donnie's struggle penetrated her consciousness like distant thunder. Through the medical area's thin walls, she could hear 800 people watching their hero face impossible odds. Just as she had 73 years ago, her eyes snapped open with sudden clarity, pupils focusing despite the sedative still coursing through her system. The paramedic monitoring her vitals jumped in surprise as she sat up with fluid motion, her movements transformed from elderly uncertainty to predatory grace. "Ma'am, you need to stay still," the medic protested. "You're showing signs of possible poisoning." "I'm showing signs of remembering who I am," Evelyn replied, her voice carrying steel that made the young man step backward instinctively. She stood, testing her balance against the drug's effects, and walked steadily toward the arena entrance. The Phoenix of Seoul was rising from decades of carefully maintained dormancy. Evelyn emerged from the medical area as Donnie absorbed another crushing blow from Victor's massive fists. The crowd's collective gasp at her appearance was audible even over the sounds of combat. No longer the frail, elderly woman who'd entered the tournament, she moved with the fluid grace of a master warrior whose dormant skills had finally awakened. The sedative still affected her coordination, but her will proved stronger than chemistry. Each step toward the fighting area carried more certainty, more of the natural balance that had once made her legendary among resistance fighters and American soldiers alike. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice crackled over the sound system. It appears Mrs. Murphy is returning to the arena. 800 people rose to their feet as one, recognizing something transformative occurring before their eyes. The elderly veterans in the audience understood first. They'd seen that same metamorphosis in comrades who'd found their warrior spirit when everything depended on it. Kellerman's confident expression shifted to concern, then growing panic as he watched his carefully constructed trap beginning to unravel. The old woman should have been unconscious for hours, not walking steadily toward a combat zone with murder in her eyes. Donnie, bloodied but still fighting, caught sight of his partner's approach and felt his own strength surge. Against three professional thugs, he'd been losing inevitably. With the Phoenix of Seoul at his side, the odds had just shifted dramatically. Ready for round two? Evelyn asked as she assumed combat stance beside him, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced worse enemies in darker places. The transformation was visible to everyone present. Gone was the uncertain, elderly woman seeking social interaction at a local dojo. In her place stood Master Eve Chin Murphy, the Phoenix of Seoul, a warrior who'd earned her reputation in blood and fire during humanity's darkest conflicts. Marcus Rodriguez hesitated for the first time, his predatory instincts recognizing a change in his praised nature. Chun Wei circled more cautiously, suddenly uncertain about easy victory against opponents who'd just become exponentially more dangerous. Viktor Kozlov, too dim to recognize the shift in atmospheric pressure, charged forward with brutal intent, straight into the combined fury of two legends who'd just remembered why some fires never truly die. The crowd held its breath as the real battle was about to begin. Not between youth and age, but between corruption and justice, cruelty and honor, bullies and heroes. The legendary partnership began with Viktor Kozlov's charge meeting immovable defense. Evelyn's traditional Korean blocks redirected his massive fist while Donnie's Wing Chun precision found the pressure points beneath his ribs. The mountain of a man staggered backward, confusion replacing confidence as his attack crumbled against techniques honed through decades of real combat. Marcus Rodriguez and Chun Wei adjusted their tactics, attempting to separate the two masters and exploit Evelyn's age through sustained assault. They discovered instead that the Phoenix of Seoul's reputation had been earned through facing exactly such overwhelming odds. Her defensive forms flowed like water around stone, every strike deflected, every grab evaded, every attempt to overpower her turned into momentum for devastating counterattacks. When Marcus grabbed for her throat, she used his own force to throw him across the mat with a hip toss that belied her 90 years. Meanwhile, Donnie's movie-perfected choreography found new depths when combined with Evelyn's war-tested practicality. His precise strikes created openings that her traditional techniques exploited with surgical accuracy. Together, they moved like dancers who'd rehearsed for decades, each anticipating the other's needs before conscious thought occurred. The crowd erupted as Marcus hit the mat hard, his professional arrogance replaced by genuine fear. Chun Wei's underground fighting experience crumbled against opponents who'd faced life-and-death combat in circumstances where losing meant more than just personal defeat. "This is impossible," Kellerman whispered from his commentary position, watching his hired professionals systematically dismantled by opponents he'd assumed were harmless relics. Viktor Kozlov, despite his size advantage, found himself overwhelmed by the combination of Evelyn's redirected energy and Donnie's precision attacks. His attempts to use brute force were turned against him by masters who understood that true martial arts wasn't about overpowering opponents. It was about making their strength irrelevant. The final sequence was poetry in motion. Evelyn's traditional Korean sweep took Victor's legs, while Donnie's Wing Chun strike to his solar plexus removed his ability to breathe effectively. The massive man collapsed like a felled tree, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Point two of three professional fighters lay defeated, while 800 spectators witnessed the return of legends who'd proven that some flames burn too brightly to ever be truly extinguished. Kellerman's face went ashen as his carefully constructed empire began crumbling before his eyes, defeated by opponents he'd criminally underestimated. With his hired professionals defeated and humiliated, Kellerman abandoned all pretense of rules and sportsmanship. He strode onto the fighting area, grabbing a pair of eskrima sticks from the equipment rack, weapons that were strictly forbidden in tournament competition. "This ends now," he snarled, wielding the hardwood sticks with vicious intent. His fighting style revealed itself as brutally efficient but devoid of honor. Techniques learned for domination rather than discipline, power without wisdom, strength corrupted by cruelty. The crowd gasped at this flagrant violation of martial arts principles. Several tournament officials moved to intervene, but Kellerman's desperation had transformed him into something far more dangerous than a corrupt businessman, a cornered predator with nothing left to lose. "You want to play with legends?" he shouted, swinging the sticks in devastating arcs that would shatter bone if they connected. "Let's see how legendary you are against someone who doesn't follow your precious rules." His assault was coordinated and merciless, targeting Evelyn specifically under the assumption that her age made her the weaker opponent. He discovered instead that the Phoenix of Seoul had earned her reputation facing enemies far more desperate and dangerous than a corrupted martial arts instructor. When Kellerman's stick thrust toward her throat, Evelyn's defensive block flowed seamlessly into a counterattack that disarmed him with surgical precision. The weapon flew across the mat as her follow-up strike to his solar plexus doubled him over in agony. Donnie's contribution was equally devastating. His movie-perfected techniques finding their most authentic application against someone who truly deserved them. Every strike carried the accumulated fury of witnessing innocent families terrorized by systematic blackmail and exploitation. The combination of traditional Korean martial arts and modern Wing Chun proved unstoppable against an opponent whose skills were built on intimidation rather than mastery. Kellerman's weapons scattered across the mat as he found himself overwhelmed by the very people he'd assumed were helpless relics. His final desperate lunge was met by Evelyn's war-tested practicality, a simple trip that sent him sprawling across the tournament mat. His expensive athletic wear torn and his arrogance finally shattered. Police sirens wailed in the distance as Kellerman lay defeated, his empire of corruption collapsing around him like the hollow structure it had always been. Detective Sarah Martinez led a team of officers through the arena entrance as 800 spectators stood in thunderous applause. The investigation that had been building for months was finally reaching its conclusion, with evidence gathered by Donnie's undercover work providing the foundation for comprehensive charges. "Mr. Kellerman," Detective Martinez announced formally, "you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, racketeering, and assault with a deadly weapon." She gestured toward the scattered eskrima sticks. "Using weapons in what was supposed to be a charity exhibition adds several more charges to your collection." Kellerman struggled to his feet, his face a mask of desperate rage and dawning comprehension. "This is entrapment. You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can," Donnie replied, producing the recording device that had documented weeks of incriminating conversations. "Every threat you made, every blackmail demand, every stolen dollar, all recorded and verified through multiple sources." Parents who had been living in terror of Kellerman's manufactured scandals began stepping forward with testimony. Maria's mother spoke through tears about immigration threats that had kept her family silent. Tommy's father described fabricated tax issues designed to destroy his small business. The financial records alone show systematic theft of over $60,000. Detective Martinez continued, consulting her notes. Youth program funds diverted to personal accounts. Tournament prize money that never reached winning participants. Scholarship donations that mysteriously disappeared. Marcus Rodriguez, Chen Wei, and Viktor Kozlov were also taken into custody, their professional intimidation services adding conspiracy charges to the growing list of criminal activities. Their reputations as feared enforcers crumbled when faced with actual legal consequences. Jenny, the young receptionist, provided crucial testimony about document forgery and deliberate falsification of financial records. Her access to Kellerman's office computer had yielded evidence of the entire blackmail operation, complete with files on targeted families and their manufactured vulnerabilities. The Athletic Commission will be conducting a complete audit of all programs associated with your organization, Detective Martinez informed Kellerman as handcuffs clicked into place. Any families who paid inflated fees will receive full reimbursements from seized assets. As Kellerman was led away in restraints, he turned for one final glare at Evelyn and Donnie. "This isn't over," he snarled, but his threat rang hollow. Defeated Bully's last desperate attempt to maintain relevance. The crowd's applause grew even louder as justice was finally served, corruption exposed, and innocent families freed from systematic exploitation. 3 weeks later, a modest ribbon-cutting ceremony took place outside a renovated storefront in the same strip mall that had once housed Kellerman's operation. The simple sign read, Murphy Yen Traditional Martial Arts Academy, with the subtitle, Honor, Discipline, Respect, etched in elegant script below. Local media coverage was respectful rather than sensational, focusing on the positive transformation of a space once associated with corruption into a genuine community resource. The building's owner, horrified by his previous tenants' criminal activities, had donated 6 months of rent to help establish the new academy. Evelyn stood before the modest gathering wearing traditional Korean martial arts attire, her posture reflecting the confidence of someone who'd fully reclaimed her identity. Beside her, Donnie wore similar formal clothing, their partnership now officially recognized through their co-instructor status. "This academy will operate on principles my late husband Walter taught me." Evelyn addressed the small crowd. "Strength serves others, knowledge is shared freely, and respect is earned through character rather than demanded through position." The first-class roster included many familiar faces. Tommy and Maria had become assistant instructors there. Natural leadership abilities finding proper channels under authentic guidance. Jenny had left her community college to help with administrative duties, drawn by the academy's genuine commitment to student welfare. Parents who had once lived in fear of Kellerman's blackmail now brought their children freely, no longer worried about manufactured scandals or extortionate fees. The Academy's sliding scale payment system ensured that financial circumstances never prevented dedicated students from receiving instruction, but a memorial wall honored martial arts masters and military veterans who had passed on their wisdom to future generations. Walter's photograph held the place of honor, surrounded by images of legendary figures who had chosen service over self-interest. "We're not trying to create champions for tournaments," Donnie explained to prospective students and their families. "We're teaching life skills, confidence, discipline, respect for others, and the understanding that true strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves." Lucy stood in the back of the gathering, beaming with pride as she watched. Her grandmother transformed from isolated widow to respected teacher. Her own black belt, earned through months of dedicated training, represented just the beginning of a journey that connected her to generations of family strength. The ribbon fell as scissors cut through it, officially opening a new chapter in multiple lives. 6 months after its opening, the Murphy Yen Academy had become the heart of its community. Evening classes filled with students ranging from elementary school children to senior citizens, all learning that martial arts transcended age, background, and physical limitations. Evelyn, now 91, handled the philosophical and traditional aspects of instruction with the wisdom of someone who'd tested theory against harsh reality. Her stories of wartime service provided context for techniques, helping students understand that martial arts existed to protect the innocent rather than dominate the weak. Donnie managed the more physically demanding training while developing a curriculum that honored traditional values while embracing modern applications. His Hollywood experience proved invaluable in creating demonstrations that were both educational and inspiring. The Academy's reputation had attracted attention from martial arts organizations nationwide. Requests for seminars and instructor training programs arrived weekly, as the martial arts community recognized something special occurring in a modest strip mall studio. Lucy had progressed to second-degree black belt, her natural teaching ability making her invaluable in bridging generational gaps between masters and younger students. Her children, Walter's great-grandchildren, were among the Academy's most enthusiastic beginners. The local television feature about the Academy brought national attention to their unique partnership and philosophy. The segment focused not on the dramatic tournament confrontation, but on the quiet daily work of teaching respect, discipline, and service to others. People ask me about retirement, Evelyn told the interviewer, adjusting her black belt with practiced ease. But how do you retire from who you are? The Phoenix of Seoul wasn't just something I did. It's something I am. That evening, as the final class concluded and students bowed respectfully before leaving, Evelyn and Donnie sat quietly in their dojo, sharing tea and reflecting on the unlikely journey that had brought them together. Walter would have loved this place, Evelyn said, looking around at walls decorated with student achievements rather than ego-driven trophies. He always believed good people should stand together against bullies. Outside, the strip mall's neon signs flickered to life as Phoenix settled into evening calm. Inside the academy, photographs of Walter and other fallen heroes watched over the continuing legacy of honor, discipline, and respect that defined true martial arts mastery. The Phoenix had risen from ashes of grief and isolation to flame again, lighting the way for others to follow. If you liked the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.